everybody. Lovely to see people pouring in on this sunny, I don't even know what day it is today. Is it Wednesday, Tuesday, Wednesday? Anyway, welcome to everybody. We'll let people come in and take their places, make themselves comfortable. Quick introduction, I'm Sue Anster. So some of you I've met and seen at meetings before. I'm the co-founder of the Women's Sport Collective, along with Kate Hannon, who's also on this call in the top left-hand corner waving, and she's in charge of the doors. She's a bouncer for the event, letting people in and out, and we'll be managing questions from everybody as well too. So thank you so much for joining us, and a huge thank you to Jess Thirlby for joining us today. I'm not going to do too much of my preamble today that I would usually do at the Women's Sport Collective. We're going to crack on because I know there's lots we want to talk about and lots of opportunity for Q&A. So the format will be, I'm going to introduce Jess, and then I do have a few questions to get us started. But what I'd really like is for all of you that are on here to ask questions of Jess. So to use the Q&A function, the chat function rather, in the Zoom system here, just to ask your questions, and then we'll go through and we'll either ask you to come off of mute if you want to ask a question yourself, or I can ask a question for you. So just let us know what you prefer. I have got 3 or 4 questions that have been sent in ahead of today, so I can start with those too. But yeah, we'd really love to have some of your questions, so it feels like it's of value to you all too. So as I say, that's going to format for the next hour, but just absolutely thrilled to have Jess here. So my formal intro: Jess is a former England netball player and the current head coach of the Vitality England Roses, widely respected across the netball world for strategic acumen and a leadership and dedication to the sport. And I think that's why we've had such a response for the number of people that wanted to come on the call today. So we already know that to be true. And I'm thrilled to say that Jess is also a patron of the Women's Sport Collective Coaching Hub, which is fantastic. And it's been great for us to have that support for the coaches that are within that hub too. In her playing career, Jess was part of Team Bath, and actually we can talk a bit about her playing career, but I think we're going to talk mainly about coaching today. But was part of that squad that won the inaugural Netball Super League, which seems a long time ago now, in 2006, and also represented England at the Commonwealth Games in 2002, and then transitioned into coaching, led the Celtic Dragons before returning to Team Bath, first as assistant coach and then as a head coach, and guided the team to multiple Super League titles. And then from 2015 to 19 was director of netball at Team Bath. And then in 2019, Jess was appointed England's head coach and took England to the finals of the Netball World Cup in South Africa in 2023, and is obviously hoping to go one better in Sydney in 2027. We all are. So just a small plug for the Game Changers podcast. So Jess was a fabulous guest on the last series of the Game Changers podcast, giving us so much of her time. We're very grateful. So if you haven't listened to that, we'll share a link in the chat area later so you can have a listen. Oh, look, how good is Kate Hannon? She's on it. Kate's already shared a link, so if you wanted to take that link for later, if you haven't listened to it, and there's kind of more background to Jess there that we'll cover off on the Game Changers podcast. So that's it, and me done. And yeah, please do go ahead and share questions, and I will get started. Jess, welcome, and thank you for giving us more time. I was going to say, what does a day hold today when you're not right in the midst of camp and everything else? What does your days look like at the moment?
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you for having me. And I didn't realise I'd be so scared, actually, looking at a couple of pages worth of people's faces. But I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, what does the day look like? Well, every day is a bit different. Obviously, we watch a huge number of matches across the weekend, anything from Friday through to Monday. So both matches overseas and here. So myself and Anna, the assistant coach, we've got quite a big shift of work to do, both live, but then obviously retrospectively, we're going through selection at the moment for next year's program, so that's exciting, but obviously comes with some big challenges and some complexities around helping to manage athletes both transitioning on and off program, and lots of kind of planning around Commonwealth Games and the year ahead in terms of our competition. So yeah, it's a lot of meetings, which as a coach is it doesn't really float my boat, does it? But needs must, and the devil is in the detail. So yeah, lots of planning at the moment, and obviously interacting with our brilliant athletes. And once we get out the other side of selection, then obviously we'll try to continue to be in their training and competition environments during the Super League season. So it's busy, just in a different way.
And do you get out to see all the Super League teams as well? Are you out when they're training? Are you you have time to do that, or is that?
Yeah, so that's always the intention during the domestic window. So I'd say the last kind of 3 or 4 years, we've tried to really focus on normalizing our kind of like presence around the training environments, as well as just obviously a keen eye on competition. We're ultimately there to support them and want them to shine. And so building and trying to strengthen those relationships year on year, both not with the athletes, but also our club environments who are so critical to our success as well. So yeah, our intention is to get around, which means lots of time in cars listening to brilliant podcasts, and obviously you helped me with that. So yeah, it's a lot of time on the road, but it's really well worth it, and it's what we have to do if relationships are everything. And we're not saying that it's perfect, but I think year on year, the last few years, our presence has been more and more kind of appreciated and welcomed, and we see the return of that when the players come back into Rose's environments as well.
Brilliant, thank you. And I guess going back to earlier days, we won't talk as much about your playing career because I think we've got lots of coaches on
It's really boring. It's really boring. It's a long time ago.
But in terms of wanting to become a coach, and what aspires you to want to pursue a career in coaching after playing?
Yeah, well, I think my coach, who coached me pretty much throughout my whole Team Bath career, and most probably was the single most important influence on me to go into coaching, was I just used to ask her why all the time, and I just was obsessed with wanting to play the game. So I most probably drove her mad for the 8 or 9 years that she was coaching me. So I think there was definitely a part of me quite early on, long before I most probably recognised, where my curiosity around really wanting to understand the game, but also wanting to play it differently at the time. I think there was always an element of a coach in me, and I think she saw that quite early on. I like to try and think differently about the game. I like to kind of really work with others and have really great conversations around like, what does the future game look like? And therefore, how might we best prepare people to really shine and maximize their potential? So not dissimilar, I'm sure, to a lot of head coaches, but even as a player, my joy really came from doing things with my teammates. It was very little about myself. If I'd had a good game, but the team, we didn't do as well as we want, I would feel that more so. I wasn't the type of player that kind of left and thought, well, it's all right because I had a good game. So my joy really comes from collaborating with people, thinking really differently about our approach to how we play it, and trying to get ahead of the curve in terms of what might the game look like in 10 years, and therefore what can we start doing now that's going to best prepare us to be brilliant in years to come. And I know that I really get a lot from trying to instill in others that their belief can be limitless and not to have a ceiling on what they're capable of. And I think that's in life in general, but obviously in sport, and in the sport that I love, having worked with all different age groups now, most probably the under 21 age group in 2009, when we went to the Cook Islands, had the likes of a Serena Guthrie in it and a Jo Harton. And at the time, we didn't really have any real evidence to suggest that they could be successful. They couldn't look at England teams that had won gold medals at that time. And so I really enjoyed the challenge I knew they were capable of something really special. And whilst that was quite early in their careers, I think they really embraced that. And we were able, with lots of others in the sport at the time, able to try and shift that mindset, because you can't wait to get a gold to believe that you're capable of winning a gold. And I really enjoyed the challenge of trying to galvanize groups to believe that they're capable of something that's not yet been done, and let's just go at it and work out how we're going to do it, rather than focus on, well, if it hasn't been done, it's going to be a bit hard. And it's like, yeah, but I don't do a too hard basket very easily. So I'm always up for, there's always a way. It's just how willing you are to think a bit differently about it.
I love that. It's a lovely quote. I don't do a too hard basket. You've obviously coached, you took that national level and then at club level. And I love that you're going back into the clubs now. How different is that as two different environments? And what do you miss? Do you miss the club element?
Yeah, I mean, if I speak to the differences, I mean, the obvious ones are, I think I was really fortunate at Bath, because the people that had kind of started that off, we were already thinking differently about a daily training environment. And I think even the England team at the time were just a weekend a month. So it would have felt much more transactional. Obviously, time on task was limited. Whereas I think in a club environment, even back then, I was afforded the chance to really have to plan for year-long programs and understand what good looks like in that space. And I think, yeah, now our time as a Roses group is intense and it's really immersive for parts of the year, as with most national squads. But with the club environment, it's obviously more frequent and it's through the week and there's weekly competition. Ours comes thick and fast, high intensity, high demand, yeah, really immersive, like obviously in each other's pockets for significant periods of time and then not at all. And I think for the club environment, it's more, in some ways it's more frequent, but obviously it's different in terms of the infrastructure. And whilst there is huge efforts at the moment and a great appetite for netball to continue on this professionalisation, there are still some constraints that clubs are having to work within that are different to our constraints. Really, we're dealing with, you know, big issues around the global calendar, you know, working between ourselves, Australia, New Zealand, domestically and internationally. They're kind of big issues which kind of interfere with the way in which we have to go about preparing the team. And ultimately, we're trying to prepare the players to play 8 games in 10 days, with the last 2 being the hardest that they'll ever play, and trying and preparing them to have their best performance on that final day. That's not what Clubland are there to try and prepare them for. You know, that their competition looks very different. You know, 1 game a week, never really needing or requiring to train them in a way that prepares them for back-to-back training, let alone competition. And so there are key differences that we, you know, year on year, we're trying to be better at objectifying those differences in a way that means we can share and help inform the clubs, the athletes, the coaches that are helping support those players. Because whilst we've got slightly different objectives in our year-long campaigns, we ultimately want the Roses to be successful. It's a shop window for the sport, and we need our Super League to be the same for us in terms of providing us with an oversupply of athletes that are more ready to go onto an international stage and take the scalp of Australia, which would be nice, which we've done a couple of times, but nowhere near yet found a way to do it kind of back to back. So yeah, there are some key differences. Do I miss it? I definitely miss certain elements of Clubland. I just think that continuity and the build of a relationship with your athletes and your staff is different. But I guess having been afforded the chance now to be, this is my 6th year in the Roses role, I think the Bath environment really helped prepare me for something that at the time, I'm not sure if every club had the infrastructure that we had for many years prior to me coming into this post. So I feel, you know, that interdisciplinary working, I'd kind of had my failures and successes with that, and still have that today in terms of how to build a team around the team and what those relationships need to look like. But I'd had a go at that. You know, I was afforded the chance to have some autonomy and make lots of mistakes, and then bring those learnings forward into the role like today. And it's different. You come across different challenges because the game moves on and our environments are changing for the better. But yeah, I do miss it, but my days are upside down. So I used to be, yeah, I used to be training until 10 o'clock at night, like most of our Super League teams are still forced to do at the moment, until the athletes become more and more professional, and then in for 6 in the morning. And now obviously my days in camp are more akin to that of kind of semi-professional, professional clubs, where they're in with us for short but intense periods. So lots of differences, and I enjoyed them both. And hopefully, having spent a long time in Clubland gives me like a degree of empathy with some of the challenges that clubs continue to face, and how we can try to continue to work together in the best interests of the players.
Thank you. I'm getting a few questions through. I've got lovely questions, but I'm going to hold mine now because I've got lots of lovely questions coming. But I had a question sent in earlier from Sarah Moore, who's writing a proposal to start a PhD around fertility issues in female athletes. And I've got a few other questions around that too that have been sent in. So Sarah's first question, so I'm just going to ask this for you if that's okay. As a coach who's balancing your sporting career and motherhood, what kind of adjustments have you had to make, or have you needed to make there?
Really good question. I think I knew quite quickly. Well, when I first fell pregnant with my daughter, who's now 13, going to be 14 later in the year, I remember the coaches I was working with at the time were like, you do realize you're going to have to slow down or even stop. And if I go back to the too hard basket, it didn't make any sense to me. I was a bit ignorant of, well, I'm not going to do that because I love what I do. And I think I learned quite quickly, having both my daughter and then my son, that within kind of weeks or months, I was on planes going over to support the national team playing in a test series in Jamaica, or I think I was just very fortunate that my husband is from a sporting background. I've obviously played the sport at a high enough level that my whole family network understands some of the demands. And I think having moved into coaching relatively young at the time for our sport, and stopped playing to coach at 26, my intent there was to try and not spread myself too thin. And I wanted to genuinely know if I could be any good at coaching. And so I think when I embarked on starting my family, whilst it felt it felt unfamiliar and most probably came with lots of challenges, I did learn over time to accept that it's okay to want to pursue a passion and try and be a good mum. And that the two can go hand in hand. But is it hard? Yes. Do you feel constant guilt? Eat both ways? Yeah. When I'm doing one job well, I feel awful at the other. The questioning and the doubting myself. And I remember going to a similar forum like this, but in the room. And I remember, a really high profile male rugby coach pretty much saying word for word that there's no way you can be a parent and be a brilliant head coach. And I was one of only two women in the room, and I found it quite offensive. And it kind of like really triggered me thinking, well, so you're looking at me in the room and telling me I'm never going to be good at my job just because I'm a mother. And I thought that was a really interesting insight into I don't know, some of the obviously views that we still have to overcome. And I think because I've got that kind of challenge mindset, and I do have a growth mindset, and I do love to learn, I still see myself as a learner every single day, that I think it's okay to give yourself permission. And I did find that tricky because of the guilt at the start, but I just knew that I'm a better person, most probably a better mum, for pursuing something that I really enjoy. It kind of fulfills me in a different way. And that doesn't mean that I don't love my kids and I don't miss them, and I'm not in trouble when I miss my daughter's birthday 4 years in a row because I'm the other side of the world. But yeah, I think, have I had to make changes? I think every family does, like whether or not you're a head coach in sport, or you work in the city, or you're a nurse, like everybody has to make adjustments. But I think it's just finding peace with, why am I doing what I'm doing, and how might that actually make me better at home for doing that. And you spoke about my transition from Team Bath into this role. I left Team Bath with no job in mind. I hadn't, this job wasn't even in the foreseeable future. So there was a period of time where I was at home navigating. I know I loved coaching, but I wasn't sure where the next role would be for me. And actually, after a few weeks of thinking, oh, this will be quite nice, doing the school runs every day, and I'm just can be mum, and I'll cook every day, and I'll be perfect. I wasn't perfect, and actually I got quite bored. So I knew and learned that it's nice to have a circuit breaker in your career to kind of fill your cup back up. But actually, I'm so motivated by being in that team environment and hopefully sharing some knowledge that I've got and that I continue to learn every day. But yeah, I think there are moments where you just know that your family are right behind you, and they've grown up with me doing netball. I get back from the Commonwealth Games finishing 4th, everybody feeling pretty broken because we didn't meet our ambitions. And the one picture I've got when I walk through the door is I look pretty horrific and I'm pretty broken. And the kids get every single gymnastics medal, football medal and rugby medal and put it around my neck. And I've got like 30 medals straight around my neck because they know that mummy was feeling a bit sore about not getting a medal for the team. And I think at that point, you just know that they get it, everyone talks about children putting perspective on things, and they really do. And I'm not sure if I'd have the right balance without my family now. So I counter the argument made by a high profile rugby coach that you can't be good at both. I actually would say, what if both makes you better? Yeah. And I can only speak for myself, and I think that is true, but it is a juggling act.
I was just thinking sound bites. There's another one. What if both make you better? You see, I can't help myself. It leads nicely into a question that was also submitted before the ones that are coming in the chat now, which I will come to in a moment, from Dr. Lamia Zafrani, who's an obstetrician and a gynecologist to elite athletes. Do you want to take yourself off of mute and ask your own question, or I can ask it for you?
Yes, I can.
Lovely.
Thank you so much for your time. And sorry, my little one's joining us today.
Excellent. Love that.
Yeah, she's 6 months old. But I was just going to say, yeah, given, I mean, I've been working with lots of different athletes in different sort of sports, but I have spoken to athletes in netball as well. it's great to see that there are female athletes who are becoming mothers and returning. And I know from practice that that is very much possible. It's not an end of your career. But what do you feel, having been in that environment, that the governing bodies can do to really solidify the system supports that need to be there to make that more of a reality?
Yeah, well, firstly, congratulations on your 6-month-old. Very
Thank
sweet. It's nice to have one on the call. Yeah, I am really proud of the fact that I think we have had a couple of more examples of obviously our athletes that have fallen pregnant, having a choice to return or not. You know, Serena chose not to return to the court, but is still impacting the game in a different way. Ebony obviously was a great example through Commonwealth Games. And we've obviously just welcomed 2 new babies with Nat Metcalfe and Laura Malcolm, both having children on the same day. And girls, so they're destined for brilliant things. But I think you raise a really important point. And actually, ironically, in the many meetings that I've been in recent weeks, we're holding ourselves accountable as a performance team. And I've asked us as a performance team to spend time saying, are we fit for purpose to welcome, and are we ready to welcome back our athletes whom have every intention to want to play at the highest level again? And I don't want to get out of my lane, because I'm not saying we aren't doing that and that there isn't great intent, but I think we just have to really pay attention to how ready we really are. It goes without saying from my perspective, you know, I've dealt with athletes that have gone through challenging fertility issues, you know, and have remained on programme, players that can't have children, players that are having children. And I just want to make sure as a sport and as a governing body, we are set up to support them. And I think that comes in so many different forms, doesn't it? I think as a programme, my role is just to say they're welcome, but then I need to lean into the governing body to say, what does their pay look like? What can they access pre, during and post pregnancy? How do we welcome them and other family members into our environment to enable them to train? And these are all like practical questions that I feel like are in my mind's eye, because I want to support that and think that we should be ready to do it. I think it's for others to obviously help us in the organisation to know how we make that work from a financial and a legal perspective, to make sure that we're doing right by them. I think the most important bit, though, is the starting point has to be that we're coming from a place where we want to support and enable them to, and to ensure that they've always got choice. And I don't know if I fully felt that when I was a coach, even part of England netball a long time ago. You know, if I didn't turn up to a meeting and I had to join it by Zoom, I felt judged because I was still breastfeeding, or it was weeks after the birth of my daughter and just travel wasn't an option. And I didn't always feel like I was being given permission to do things slightly differently. And I guess that's why I'm quite sensitized to it now. And I want our sport to be leading in that space. And I think we've got challenges, obviously, from a financial perspective, but that shouldn't ever mean that people don't feel supported, as long as we're being honest and transparent around the steps we're taking to be better set up. So yeah, without speaking on behalf of lots of people in the organisation, my sense is, and with things like Netball Her, where we're paying so much attention and showcasing that and speaking really openly, I think pregnancy and returning from pregnancy to elite sport should never be something that people feel they can't do. And I guess I'm really proud that somebody like Nat, who's been quite public around her ambition to return, if that's what she remains wanting to do, knows that she is really supported. And I think, you know, the journey up until the birth of her daughter last week has been one of complete support. And I'm really proud of at least our performance team and how we've gone about that. But I think I'd be being naive if I didn't say there was work to be done. And I hope that we can be a good example of that moving forward.
I mean, I definitely think netball is doing better things than a lot of other bodies. So yeah, that's definitely the case.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. I'm going to combine a couple now if I can do. So I've got a question from Katie Chubb, who asked about what advice you'd give to coaches starting out on their coaching journey. And then Anna Collins asked, what are the best routes for coaches at a higher level? So that transitioning from club to NSL, how do those routes exist? How does that process? Maybe do it's quite a general one, advice for coaches starting out, but what would be a 2 or 3 top tips, would you say?
Well, I can only draw on my own experience, really, of things that I feel really benefited me. I think a lot of it was, I often say to people, you'll never feel completely ready, so don't let that get in the way of having a go. Whether or not kind of that's been when applying for certain roles or opportunities, paid and unpaid, during my coaching career from quite a young age, I think it's really easy to tell ourselves, oh, I'm not ready, I'm not qualified, I'm not experienced enough. It's really easy to tell yourself that narrative and therefore deny yourself the opportunity of letting somebody else make that decision, but just keep putting your hand up. And I most probably was that annoying person. Like I would be having exactly the same level of doubt, and I would look at the, a job description telling me what I needed and think, oh, I haven't got that one, so therefore I won't go for it. And I just kind of went for everything. I volunteered for lots of things. I sought out learning opportunities in other environments outside of our sport. I tried not to listen to outside noise or compare myself, but it's human nature to do that. But I think sometimes let the decision rest with somebody else. Your decision is just whether or not you want to be considered and have your name in the hat. And actually, I think with that approach, I've most probably given myself more opportunities to experience different environments, work with different coaches, both in and outside of sport, actually, that I wouldn't have had if I just didn't have the preparedness to put my hand up. And I think sometimes when you're like that, you can get criticized for it, or, people are like, well, why is she doing that? Why has she had that opportunity? Often it was because I gave up something or gave up my time, or I actually took a year out of my degree. And these are things that people don't know. They're the unseen, unnoticed things and sacrifices or commitments that you're willing to make to have a go at something, not even knowing if you're going to be any good at it. So I think, I would really encourage everybody to don't underestimate yourself. Let somebody else make that decision and keep putting your name in the hat. And also try and be brave to go outside of like your comfort zone in terms of your bubble. I think in netball, we can sometimes be quite, I think we're a bit narrow sometimes, like it's all consuming. Often coaches in our sport are still wearing multiple hats. So there'll be a director of the game, there'll be chair of something, there'll be the head coach, the assistant coach, part-time physio. I'm sure it's the same in a lot of sports transitioning to full professionalization. And I think when that becomes overbearing, the risk as a coach is you almost stall your own learning, and then you only know what you know from within a very small circle. And I just encourage coaches at all levels, actually, in response to your second question, it's not enough to only know what we know from the experiences that we've had. We've got to go outside of that, and we've got to be prepared to commit time to that. It's too easy for us to all say we're too busy. And it's like, I would just, if you repeat, the old saying, really, if you repeat the same thing every year, that doesn't mean you've got better. So are you giving yourself the chance to actually improve and progress as a coach? The athletes we're working with really deserve that. So I don't think there's ever a time when it's okay to stand still and be mediocre. We've got to move with the times. And I think, netball can feel quite insular at times, and actually find people that think differently to you, because that's okay. And actually it's most probably that's the source of learning that you need. And definitely get outside of even your own sport, but I would say sport full stop. Look into the arts, look into business, look at things that align with some of the topics or things that you're working on. And don't be afraid of not knowing or not having an answer. Like, the more I've kind of been brave enough to speak, I've been in so many places and I get huge imposter syndrome, thinking I don't deserve to be here. And I think the UK sport program that I went on was a great experience for me as a young coach, not yet fully coaching as a profession, moving from playing. I sat in a room with people who were already so far down the coaching journey, and I just felt like I didn't belong. They didn't make me feel like that. That was the story I was telling myself. But actually, it's one of the best learning experience for me because of the way it was set up. And it's taught me to make sure that I do go outside, even when things are feeling tough and quite intense. Find those critical friends outside of your own sport and your own club. There's so many coaching skills that require something that isn't sport specific. So most of your learning and progress will be made away from your actual day-to-day if you're prepared to commit time to it.
Thank you. That's such a good point, isn't it? Caroline Woolett has put a fabulous question in. It's obviously a fabulous question because it was one of the ones I prepared before, but hers is probably better than mine. Caroline, do you want to ask your question? I've put you on the spot there. If you can find your unmute, and if not, I'll ask it. No, okay. So Caroline's question is, can you share I guess my version of it was everybody's got an opinion, haven't they? Every netball fan sits on the side and thinks they'd make a different decision around who's playing where and when, etc. We've all got our opinions. So Caroline's question is, how do you deal with the pressures of those views and opinions from people either directly or via social media that are constantly dissecting your coaching decisions? How do you personally deal with that noise?
It depends what day we're on. So some days really terribly. Other days I kind of embrace it, and I see it as a real strength that people have an opinion. I think for our sport, it's really important that there is opinion, and opinion is welcome. But obviously there's a line, isn't there, between protecting yourself personally. But I think for the sport, opinion's really healthy. And I remember a couple of years ago, we finished, I think, a quad series, maybe pre-Commonwealth Games, so maybe 2022, the January 2022. And we drew to Australia, and then we played them the next day in the first final we'd made in a quad, and we lost to them, but we kind of like just faded significantly in the last 5 or 6 minutes. And I just remember that it's always, the focus will always be on the last thing, and the focus will be on the fact we lost. But actually what we knew was it was a sign of some progress, because we drawn with them the night before, we had another go at them, and we knew that we weren't yet where we needed to be to beat them. And I just remember most of the interviews I did thereafter just focused on us losing to Australia, not the fact that we'd played them twice, that we'd pushed them until the final minutes in back-to-back days, inexperienced players or debutantes. And I just remember thinking, it's such a mindset shift that our fans are expecting us to win. And that's not something that I want to push away, because it's taken decades for our fan base to come to expect us to win. And that, of course, there's an element, it's the prerogative of our fans to want us to be successful. And we too are working at that every day. But I think that more often than not, I played in England teams where you knew the result before we even stepped out on court against Australia. It was just by how many are we going to lose? And so it feels wrong to be in the position I'm in now, which is a really privileged position, and push away or defend, the fact that we've lost to Australia. It's like, if you guys are expecting us to win, that tells me something about the expectation and the belief that you have in this group. And I think that's a real sign of strength, actually. So I think there have been times, and I'm definitely not trying to make out that this is all perfect. There have certainly been really tough times, I think, from an opinion perspective. But I've taken my time off social media, but I also feel a duty to contribute and hear the thoughts on social media. So I find that space really difficult, because I don't want to be completely silent, because I want to be part of the movement of promoting our sport. But obviously, as soon as you're on social media, you open the door to a degree of criticism. I think everyone can have an opinion I have an opinion on coaching decisions every week. I watch stuff, but I do it from a place where I'm doing it through the lens of a coach, and I know that there will be things I don't know that will have led to those decisions. So therefore I sit in a place of respect for that and curiosity. So that, yeah, I've had to definitely protect myself at times by having little breaks and circuit breakers off social media. I'm still learning how to not listen to some of it, but I'm definitely better now than I was a few years ago. And I think when you care about the progress of your team and you care about your fan base and you want the sport to grow, it's hard to not listen. But I do find it difficult, because I don't want to be completely away from social media. I want to help promote not just our sport, but women's sport. So if I'm not on social media, I feel like I'm not playing the role that I feel I've been given the chance to do. So I'm a bit more selective, I think, now around like which things do I say yes to and no to, which things do I think are going to have a greater ripple effect for netball, the sport, the team, and women's sport. And yeah, just kind of filtering out some of those, I guess, not avoiding criticism. I think that's it is part of the job. And as I say, where I can, I try and hear the bits that are actually useful to me. And sometimes they can signpost you to pay attention to something. So it is tricky. I know people even on this call who work with me will know that I'm not brilliant at it, and I'm just human at the end of the day. And that's okay. Just be your authentic self. But I think I've got quite a thick skin. I don't think I'd still be here if I didn't. So yeah, it's okay to pull that on every now and again.
Excellent, thank you. And then a question about coaching, I guess the team around you and assistant coaches and so on. So Kate Harley has asked, Kate, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for your time today, Jess, as well. It was just a quick one. So obviously you were in England set up with Anna as assistant coach. So I just wondered, what did you learn from the experience of assistant coach and then bring into your position now?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think, unfortunately or fortunately for Anna, her and I have kind of crossed paths, like intertwined since we were about 13. So through our playing career, obviously Anna went on to play for Wales. I was playing for England, then at Team Bath, and then we've both kind of held like multiple different roles. I kind of went into coaching full time quite a long way before Anna. Anna had different things that she was pursuing from a career perspective. So I think, yeah, I guess it's difficult to answer, because I think when you find relationships like the one Anna and I have, I do feel like they're quite unique. And I think because we've both played together, there's a kind of mutual respect, but a level of challenge that I think people underestimate. I think people think because we get on, we're just really amenable to each other and we don't disagree. And that's just not true. I think what it does is it just comes from a place of trust and respect, which means actually those levels of checking challenge are more welcomed actually and invited, and can be more easily absorbed between the two of us. And I think we co-coached, I don't know if they just couldn't make their mind up at under 21 interview, to be honest, but in 2009 we were appointed co-coaches, which was pretty unheard of at that level up until then. I don't think it's been done since. So I do think they were just indecisive. But anyway, it was a good job, because I think the two of us were most probably the only two that I knew that we could most probably navigate that together. And as you say, we've both been, I was an assistant coach, specialist coach when Anna was the Roses head coach. And now she obviously finds herself as assistant coach to me. And even in our Team Bath days, you know, a title really meant very little to Anna and I, director of netball or head coach. I mean, it's an optic for the outside world rather than us. I think we've just always had an ability to work pretty collaboratively together. And I'd say it is just born out of a very high and deep level of trust and understanding and knowing each other pretty well on and away from the court. And I guess because our coaching journeys have kind of like happened at a similar time, albeit I found myself head coach at Team Bath a few years before. I think we've just got so many shared experiences, really, that I'm not sure it's akin to many other journeys. I think it's just in itself, it's quite unique. And so, yeah, what have I learned? I just think one thing I'd go back to recommending coaches to do is don't be afraid to play all of those roles. I've been an assistant coach, a head coach, a director of netball, a technical coach, a specialist coach. And I think that's really set me up well now to know how to get the best out of those coaches that I invite in to work with us in the team. I'm not particularly ego driven. So the title, whilst I feel very fortunate to be in the role I am, and obviously a head coach is incredible and an experience I'll never forget in years to come, but the title really isn't the thing for me. I remember getting asked that quite early in my coaching journey with UK Sport. Oh, do you want to be the England coach? And it just felt like such a strange question at the time. And I remember feeling pressure to say yes. And then a few years into my coaching journey, I thought, actually, what's more important is to understand, going back to your initial question, Sue, why do I coach and why is it important to me? And actually, the environment is the most important thing. I need to be in an environment where there's a degree of autonomy, where there's really big, bold ambition, and that there's a degree of support that is going to help with that. And if I find I'm in an environment where we're going to settle for something, it's not for me. So whether I'm named head coach or director of netball or assistant coach, it isn't actually the thing that makes me tick. It's got to be how the environment is set up and having brilliant people around you with big, bold ambitions, scary ones. So yeah, I've learned loads, but I would say not just with Anna, but our journey's definitely been very, very unique. And yeah, she's a glutton for punishment, obviously coming back into the fold with me for Roses now as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Kate, for that. A question from Lynn Winkworth. I think if Lynn's happy to ask it, but just it's a question around netball and players transition to coaching, but actually it is a question that's very relevant for all sports. I would say that we're seeing like that, professional players or elite players. Lynn, are you happy to ask your question? Or...
Yeah, I'm here. Hi Jess, Lynn from University of Nottingham. Appreciate we see you a little bit here, which is nice. But yeah, my question was just around, there's probably quite a lot of us on the call that are coaches in any sport, but around netball. And we see a lot of head coaches, NSL coaches, being those that are ex-athletes or have played at a higher standard than I ever managed to do. And kind of what's your advice for coaches like us who maybe have more experience on the coaching side, but not on the playing side, and how we can balance that? 'Cause there's a few examples of people who come in straight from playing. So just your advice around that, really.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really fair question. There is space and room for everybody, is like the first point I'd like to make. But I agree, like there's most probably more obvious examples of those that have played the game transitioning into it. I was really cognizant of that when I was making my transition from playing to coaching, and in no way did I ever try and circumnavigate the system. I actually really enjoyed the formal learning piece and actually embarking on my formal qualifications when I was still quite young, encouraged by my coach at the time. So my level 1, 2 and 3 I kind of did by the time I was in my early 20s, and I was still playing then, so it was kind of just readying me for it. But I was really respectful that those formal learning opportunities take you through processes that, whilst they may feel uncomfortable, and as an athlete I didn't necessarily always know or feel comfortable in that situation. I learned loads by going through it, and for me it was really important that I had the integrity and credibility that I had gone through the right processes. In no way did I ever mean or want to leapfrog any system. But at the same time, obviously, I had some playing experiences, and I had to almost relearn how I'd learned things as a coach. So there are pros and cons to it, I think, because as a player, there is a risk you're quite lazy with your thinking and you don't know how you learned it, but you're trying to tell. I made many mistakes for the first few years of just telling players everything I knew, which didn't really help them get better. So I had to kind of relearn the coaching side of it. So I would say for those coaches that maybe aren't coming from a high level playing background, firstly, trust yourself. Secondly, know that there is space for you. And actually, it's almost the reverse to my experience. So I almost had to relearn the coaching element, whereas you're most probably far more skilled earlier in your coaching journey at the coaching skills. And therefore the knowledge of the game may be higher up, which may not be something that you've been as close to or performed at, is naturally where you might want to pay more attention. So when we think about those learning environments or people, not being afraid to knock on the door of, other sports, but at a higher level, the next level up from where you are currently. Ask questions of people that maybe are coming from the playing side, because I think it's the knowledge of the game at that level that clumsily people think you maybe don't have, and that's not always fair. So I think if you can build evidence that you've been curious around that, and that your knowledge of the game speaks to a level beyond which you necessarily participated in, that's almost the reverse journey for me. So I had to work hard to show my credibility at my coaching skills and communication and session design and planning, more so than maybe my knowledge of the game to start with, because my knowledge was something that I really enjoyed sharing, but actually it was lost on the athletes I was working with in the first few years, because I was missing the skills to coach and how people learn. So I think it's just the same the other way around, and that's why I feel quite strongly that I would hate for any coach to feel they can't be successful just because they've not played the game. And I also I'm never going to be a fan of anyone that tries to circumnavigate the system, but sometimes it's not always the coach's fault. Sometimes I think, in other sports we see examples where sometimes coaches maybe are accelerated, but if there's some recognition of prior learning, I also think that's okay. And I think it's okay on both parties to say, what learning do you arrive with, and therefore where is your starting point compared to somebody else? And I think that's okay. We talk about individualizing how we coach players, and I think it should be the same for coaches. But yeah, that would be, I hope there's something useful in my answer, really.
No, there is. Thank you.
Thank you, Jess. And I'm conscious you've got 15 minutes left. Can people in the chat function, there's a little thumbs up and whatever. If there's questions there you'd like us to ask, do you want to give them a little thumbs up vote, and I can maybe pick a couple that have got the most little thumbs up, or whatever emoji you used to use. That was really interesting, Lynn. Questions. Also, I think we got coaches on here from rugby and cricket, and I know we've had conversations where there are male players, professional players, that are coming in with very little coaching experience, but coming in, obviously not having it in netball yet, but I realise that's a issue across sports there, isn't it, too? Fee, I've got Fee Harold on the call, and I feel I should just let her ask her question because it's Fee, really. Fiona, would you like to ask your question?
Thanks, Sue. Hi, Jess. Fiona
Hi.
Harold, World Netball CEO. Good to see you. Love listening to you. Loved your podcast, so everyone should listen to it if they haven't already. I guess this is more relevant to global netball, but coming at it from a high performance coach, you talked about the big, bold ambitions, looking at the next 10 years and how the landscape may change, and that navigation of domestic versus international challenges, which is really difficult across all sports, as you've alluded to. And I don't think there is a silver bullet, but from your point of view as a high performance coach, what would you say are the one or two things you would like to see change, or stakeholders working together at a global level to enable you as a coach and the Roses to thrive in the best possible environment?
Yeah, it's lovely to have you on. This is great because I can tick some things off my to-do list now.
Right, give it all to me, please.
No, I think, look, I agree it's such a complex landscape at the moment, but for all good reasons. I think world netball is in most probably the best state it's been in from a level of competitiveness amongst the top 7-8 countries in the world. I don't think there's ever been a time where anyone could beat anyone, and I don't think we could have said that until recent years, and I think that's really exciting. I think what comes with that, though, is I see that as a huge strength, and for all of us that love the game, we want to maintain that and keep growing that. Obviously, that for those that have enjoyed their time at the top, that's also a threat, which I'm sure isn't a welcome one. So I guess it's really difficult with obviously everyone's agendas in terms of wanting to protect their position world ranking wise, and Australia clearly having led the way for so long with New Zealand. But I think for the state of the game, this is perfect. I think it's perfect that people can't predict the result of a game between Jamaica and New Zealand, or Australia, New Zealand, and us getting in the mix recently. I guess the challenge is, how do we collectively get around the table to make sure that the competition internationally and domestically allows that to continue to thrive, so that what we don't have are constraints that almost get in the way of us harnessing that, because I think we're at the cusp of something really special that could draw so much attention and hopefully investment into the game, because of the fact that teams have worked so hard to try and bridge the gap between themselves and their biggest opponents. So I think some form of obviously alignment and collaboration around domestic competitions and international competitions that bring that kind of wow factor and kind of harness that, I think is really important, and most probably a brilliant opportunity. I'm not saying it's easy, but I guess at the minute we're all trying to land grab like competitions for ourselves that give us a chance of meeting our big ambitions when we hit a Commonwealth Games and World Cup. And it can be quite messy and complex at times. And I wonder if there's a way that we just need to continue to get heads around the table to try and align the process by which I guess we can build and strengthen international competition, and in turn align those domestic competitions in a way that will support that. I guess, yeah, the other things, I think domestically, we obviously need more than one league in the world to attract the best players in the world, and to be helping more athletes to become full-time netballers with careers. For my daughter and all of those coming up through the ranks, to know that they can choose netball as a career. But it's not just the athletes, it's the infrastructure around them. And my kind of immediate concern is, whilst I completely agree with trying to professionalize the game, pay our players better, we can't do that too far ahead of everything that's needed to enable those players to shine. And I think the infrastructure has to go concurrently with that. So whether that's officiating, whether it's, the strength and conditioning, I think our domestic environments across all of our domestic competitions across the world need some type of parity, and we need to be learning from each other as to how do we accelerate some of those things quicker than others, because my concern is that the athletes quite rightly get all of our attention, and then we forget about the cliff edge between having an athlete turn up for full-time training but without any full-time staff or the support to help them recover and prevent injury is most probably not going to work. So I think if we can, that's the other area for me, is professionalizing our domestic competitions, but the infrastructure needed around that at the same time as quite rightly remunerating and rewarding our athletes for the commitment that they show. But we want a healthy population of players that we can mitigate against, injury where it's more controllable, so that we can see these brilliant players across the court, across the world, week on week. And I think, there's most probably two big things there: international calendar. How do we harness what is most probably the healthiest competition at the moment across teams on the international scene, by either aligning or adding and strengthening our competition, but it's the process underneath it. So it's less around the power of those nations that are ahead of the game domestically and internationally, and more around, in the best interest of the sport, what is each of our responsibility really to grow the game. It's most probably not as specific as you wanted, but those things feel very front of mind at the moment.
Yeah, thanks, Jess. Really helpful.
I saw her taking notes, Jess. That's fabulous.
I've not told her anything she doesn't already know.
I know. Thank you, Fee. There. I've got a question from Alexandra that's been liked by 9 people. So, Alexandra, do you want to take yourself off mute and ask it, if that's okay? Good question.
Hello, thank you so much for your time. I'm predominantly from a rowing background, and I've tried to do a bit of research into menstrual cycles and their effect on training and performance. So I just wondered whether that was an element that you'd looked at. How has that affected your training programs when you've been writing your training programs, or is there more to be done? So any learnings, basically.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think the quick answer, there's definitely more to be done. I think the initiative around our Netball Her has really helped open up the conversation, and I think make it much more organic and natural to talk about it. And I appreciate there was already science behind, and for some sports quicker than others, already science behind some of that, and other sports most probably are a bit further down the line than us, but we're very cognizant of paying attention to menstrual cycles in a sport where obviously the lower limb is hit pretty hard. And, our knee issues and the relationship between that and the menstrual cycle and the female physiology is clearly something that we have to continue to pay attention to. And I don't think that's something we haven't been, but I think learning from other sports that maybe have been afforded to or have had more resource in this area to move quicker is something that I'm really keen for us to keep doing. Our sports science and medicine team and our physical prep team, with support from the coaches, absolutely pay attention to menstrual cycles. I think the conversation is much more open amongst us and the player group. I think navigating what are the better tools to both first record it and then obviously understand for each athlete how it's affecting them, as well as obviously just the global piece around us being a female sport with lower limb injuries being a significant issue for us, is something that we have to have an interest in and pay attention to. And I think we are, but I would say there's definitely still work for us to do around, firstly, are we measuring and monitoring it consistently? What's that telling us? And then how does that speak to, as you say, the tangible things around how we prepare and train the athletes, and what can we get ahead of? And I think what we've done really well in the short term is individualizing our approach with athletes. So we know much more around menstrual cycles for certain athletes and how it affects them. And I think we're learning stuff with that all the time with our player group. But the fact that that's now a more open conversation was the first big step to take, I think. And I'd like to think our player group know that those things can be shared in a really safe space, psychologically safe, but also from a physical perspective, they know that they'll be looked after and listened to and heard. And, whilst that needs to become more systematic and more science and evidence-based, I think there's a real appetite, and netball isn't shying away from that at all. So I can trust and be confident that we'll keep making improvements in that area.
Brilliant. Thank you. And good luck with your research as well, Lynn. I'm going to try and squeeze in 2 questions into 5 minutes because I think I can. Laura's microphone's not working, so I'm allowed to ask a question, which is, what are some of the values in the England netball setup currently that you feel should be implemented at every level of netball?
Some of the values in England netball.
Or I can move on to an easy one around clothing and kit.
Well, you can give me both. What's the clothing and kit one? I'm not avoiding
clothing-
it. I'm just trying to.
Actually, who asked the clothing and kit? Do you want to jump off and ask your question? It's further up there. Oh, Kate Kent. I guess it's just whether the elite kit, are they effective?
Oh, hi, sorry. It's all right. You go for it.
Oh, sorry. Is that right? Very quickly, do they effectively support performance? Do you think there's room for improvement through co-design with the players? And obviously the grassroots level unisex jerseys kits are often available. I guess it's all those issues around female clothing and the netball dress and the dress. So
Yeah, I think, well, to reassure people, our athletes are always asked to co-create and share opinion from the start of any process around kit. So I know from a Rose's perspective, always asked to contribute and help make decisions around our kit. We've also linked in with hockey, so like we're really well aware of like some of the brilliant work that's been done away from our sport, and as always very willing to kind of like invite others in to kind of help shape the direction of travel around kit. I think it's, for me, the most important principle is that athletes feel listened to and heard. And I think there are multiple variations of kit that are not going to hinder performance. And so I don't have any strong opinion that there's only one form of kit. I think as long as we are obviously working within any constraints that we've got from a world netball perspective or tournament perspective, but we've explored lots of different items of kit at a Rose's level going in and out of competitions. And I sometimes think it's not actually, it hasn't fallen short because of there not being an appetite to have choice. I think sometimes it's just that getting the timing right and the quality of it and the fit. So it's not about whether there's an appetite to have different options and choice. It's just making sure when we have that people are comfortable in the new options as well as what we've been used to seeing, which is obviously the dress. But the athletes, you know, they're invited to co-create when it comes to kit all the time from a Rose's perspective. So they have a big say in it. And I think they sometimes struggle with, obviously, there's a difference between the practicalities and feel of something and ensuring that people's identity feels reflected in the kit, as well as the prestige and the nostalgia they feel around the dress. And I think that's sometimes where the really important discussions lie, but it's never coming from a place of denying somebody from feeling comfortable and representative of who they are and how they want to feel. And I think that's important to keep hold of. But often the dress gets spoken about because it's the thing they aspire to pull on. But that doesn't mean that there's not room for that to be something different now or in the future. I think we're just very open-minded when it comes to kit.
Yeah, thanks. What about grassroots?
Yeah, I don't want to speak or get out of my lane really, because I know this is something that's been tackled quite recently within the governing body. So I think grassroots is most probably something for somebody else to help kind of give you the most up-to-date information. But I know from the little where I've been involved with conversations for all levels, I think choice is really important. And I think it is really important that people feel heard and are comfortable playing the game they love. We want people to play netball and love playing it and feel brilliant. And if kit is a really important and a really important element. And I think it's great that the conversation has had so much debate across all different sports over the last couple of years, because I don't know if we were really as aware as we should have been as to how much of a barrier that may have posed for lots of different reasons, for different populations. So yeah, my inclination is we are paying attention to that and have done, but I wouldn't want to speak out of turn with kind of confirming where the organisation have landed most recently with kit at grassroots level.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you everybody for your more amazing questions. And next time I do this, I don't need to prepare any questions. Thank you. And thank you so much to Jess for your openness and your honesty and just giving us more time in a very busy time and schedule of life, but really appreciate the time you've given us today. Thank you for Kate for assisting too. And yeah, thank you to everybody for being a part of it. And we have a recording that we will share and hopefully see you at other events and webinars and meetups again soon. But yeah, thank you so much to Jess, and we look forward to seeing you all again very soon.